Good evening and welcome to TDM Talk Show. I'm your host, Kelsey Wilhelm. Our guest tonight is Alidad Tash, founder and managing director of 2NT8 Ltd, a Hong Kong-based consultancy specializing in casinos and integrated resorts. With decades in the gaming industry both in Vegas and Macau, as well as working with numerous gaming operators including Sands China and Melco, Tash has a wealth of experience in the industry, as well as dozens of other interests and passions that we hope to delve into today. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
It's been some time since we've been trying to get this organized. Thank you again for making the time.
Absolutely.
So we've had a very, very interesting year so far. We've recently gotten some hopeful news in terms of what happened with the opening up first to Zhuhai and then almost immediately to the Guangdong province. And then we're coming up on September 23rd on having us opening up to all of China, if everything goes well. Judging by how it's all happened so far, given that Guangdong contributes so much of Macau's visitation, how do you picture this rollout to the whole of the mainland?
You know, there's no question that about a month ago, the news of China opening up Guangdong and then eventually all of China opening up to Macau and bringing the tourist visas is great news. But it's all a matter of relativity. Compared to where we are today, down 95%, making 1/20th of what we did a year ago. Any kind of an improvement, whether it's doubling, tripling, quadrupling, sounds good. But to really go back to where we want to go, we have to kind of rely on multiple fronts. China accounted for 80%, mainland China accounted for 80% of the gaming revenues. Of that, about 7/10 of what China contributed happened to be within outside Guangdong. So first of all, we have to understand whether or not how that's going to be done. So far, Guangdong, which has been for the last 3 weeks, there's been a noticeable increase in the number of visitation, but it's not nearly the 20% of a year ago or 80% down that people anticipated. Most likely the month is trending to be somewhere around 15% of what we made it a year ago. Whether or not the mainland Chinese are going to be as ready to hop on a plane and get over here is another question, another challenge. And I believe that there's a few things that have yet to be considered. I don't think they're just as ready to come over here from Guangdong. Let's examine this. A year ago, if I was sitting in Shanghai, or if I was sitting as one of the 49 IVS cities, the individual visa scheme cities, tourist visas, I would have just basically gone to a travel agent, got one of the multiple flights coming to Macau. I wouldn't have to worry about anything else. I'd go to my bank, collect some money, and the visa process would have been relatively easy. And I'd be back to Macau and life would be wonderful.
And you could enter a casino without having to have a nucleic acid test.
Correct. Yes, we'll get to that, precisely. Last year, just look at non-Guangdong regions of China. Out of 39 million people who visited Macau, roughly 70% of it came from mainland China. Of the people from mainland China, about 38% of them came from the non-Guangdong region of Macau. Consider those numbers of people. Let's just pick a 5 million subset of those people, because some of them may have had repeat visits. First of all, are those 5 million people that we're potentially looking forward to over the next few months to welcome into Macau, are those 5 million people the same doing as well economically? Do they have the same amount of jobs?
Almost definitely no.
No. And also, even if you manage to have retained your job, is the outlook for your business good enough? And is there tightening in your money? Psychologically, when the whole world's going down and people are losing money, even losing their jobs, even though China's coming back, the world economy has not come back. Wall Street and Main Street are quite different. So the same 5 million people will go to the bank. Will they withdraw the same amount of money? No, all of them will have dropped off. Then the group of people who do want to come in here, to go get a visa now, you have to wait 1 week just to get an appointment to come in and then possibly receive a visa for 1 more week. That's 2 more weeks of waiting. And you have a short window to actually arrive. Then you have to then have either something shoved up your nose or down your throat, which is not a very pleasant experience.
No,
Some people are more afraid of the procedure, even though technically I've had it. It's more of a tickle. But in some cases, you can see some of the nurses are not very, they're kind of rough. They think they're injecting a rhinoceros. So getting to Macau already, then you have to go into an airplane. Am I as comfortable sitting in an airplane? First of all, there are as many airplanes available. And when I come to Macau, I'm going to be scrutinized every single time I walk to the casino. and I go out and I come back, I have to prove that I'm innocent, as I'm clean. And then once I go there, the dealer is no longer smiling at me. The dealer is looking like it is a surgery. You know, there's wearing masks. I'm constantly reminded.
And that's something that a lot of people kind of blow over. They look at the fact that Macau is needing to have this visitation, but they're not looking at the casino experience in and of itself, because it's meant to be an engaging, fun experience, which is making you happy theoretically, even though Vegas and Macau are very different in terms of how their gaming floors look.
Absolutely. In fact, that is the difference. In the US, I've worked in Vegas many, many years. In the US, being individualistic people don't want to be sitting and having lots of people invade their space. In China, the busier the casino, the busier the table. And the more people are around you back betting, something that's not allowed in Vegas, the more likely it is that it's much more fun. Now you're prohibited because of social distancing. That's already another thing. I'm not saying those 5 million people are not coming, but they will probably come at a much longer period. The total amount of money that they're going to be bringing with themselves is a lot less.
And we hear about the possibility that there'll be further restrictions on the cross-border money flows as well.
Exactly.
Which are already tight.
That's the challenge we have with the VIP. And that's going to affect more the premium mass and mostly predominantly the junkets and then the premium direct people. The VIP world is having some challenges. There's a little bit of a kind gesture by the government of China to have somewhat restricted travel of the mainland Chinese into those places where online gaming is practiced.
Yeah, other gaming jurisdictions. So some of these that people have pointed to in particular are maybe Cambodia, Laos, Philippines.
Philippines, yeah. It's more difficult right now to actually go there. But that's that's one plus. But you got to go towards the 5 or 6 things, you know, the physical pain, the testing and everything else, the psychology, the dealer's still there. Adding them all up, I just don't see the things coming back. By the way, that's only 80% of the gaming revenue, even if China were to come back. What about the 10% contributed by Hong Kong? What about the other 10% contributed by the rest of the world, which is predominantly Taiwan, Japan, Korea?
Well, and it seems like because of the way that Hong Kong is going, it doesn't, not only is the Hong Kong population such a large contributor as comparative to mainland China, not so much, but overall, but the avenue for people to get into Macau is through the Hong Kong International Airport.
Exactly.
But they don't seem to have their act together either.
It will take quite some time before Hong Kong opens up. I mean, Hong Kong's ferries were shut down the first week of February before casinos were shut
Surprisingly.
down. And again, it was a unilateral action. And the question is, will Macau be comfortable? This travel bubble that is supposedly going to exist between Macau and mainland China, are they ready yet to go and welcome Hong Kong, given some of the shenanigans that Hong Kong has been up to over the last year and a half? They're not exactly, you know, there's not as much appetite to go ahead and potentially risk getting reinfected. That's another challenge that we have. So,
and we're seeing, for example, that it seems like the rollout of this in terms of the September 23rd gives them at least 2 weeks before, well, it gives them a week before we're coming up on Golden Week.
yes.
But there are very, very high expectations, and it seems like people are banking the entire quarter on Golden Week. Is it accurate to think that Golden Week is going to be anything like what the expectations are?
Golden Week will be fantastic, but that's only 7 days.
Yeah.
And there's probably there's another one in May and there's another one in Chinese New Year, which really day 3 goes forward. That's not enough. And there's another perception. There's a lot of people are sitting there, there's pent up demand, there's a revenge spent. People go crazy after being cooped up and suddenly they go, yeah, but just like you're on a diet and suddenly you decide to go crazy and you go get a big chocolate cake and you eat the whole thing, doesn't mean that you're going to continue doing it.
Every single day, yeah.
Even if it happens with the Golden Week, that's just 1 week out of the entire 52 weeks we're going to be looking forward to. So I'm not saying this is not good news. I'm just saying don't make it sound like we're going back to the good old days.
Yeah.
The vaccine has yet to be distributed worldwide, has yet
or
to
even
be
approved. I mean, we don't have anyone that's finished trials.
correct. And even some countries have claimed that their vaccine is working. That's correct. But even they have admitted that they have no long-term, because COVID-19 is less than 1 year old. So we really don't know whether or not 18 months from now we'll find out some other repercussions, some other challenges we may have had because there's just not enough sample size. So it's going to look good, but kiss 2020, 2021 off. And let's hope that 2022 things are going to go back to
Well, this is going to have a really long-lasting impact because we're not only dealing with regional competition and changes within the whole gaming sphere and the appetite for gaming in and of itself, but as you mentioned, the way that people have less disposable income, it seems like they're going to be less cautious. They're going to be more cautious in how they're spending it. So are you sure 2022 is going to be something, well, would you say 2022 is going to be something like we saw in 2019, or are we going to see something that's going to be 30–40% below that?
Okay, first of all, I never said 2022 is when things are going to go back to normal. I'm saying it will not happen before then, definitely. However, even, let's take the Macau Macau total gaming. Macau made $36 billion in gaming revenue. Casinos collectively won $36 billion. Of that, $14 billion was VIP. And $22 billion was mass. That was the lowest percentage of VIP contribution in Macau since, I think, since liberalization. I mean, it used to be as high as 77%. Yeah. 77, 78%.
Back 2013, 2012, days like that.
And 2013 was like 72%. If you actually look at it, from 2011 to 2014, this is before anti-corruption really suddenly came and dropped everything in 2015. About 65% of all gaming revenue was VIP.
Yep.
The remaining 35% was mass. Since then, the actual average VIP win has gone down from the average of 25, 26, 27 billion for those four years to 14 billion last year. So we really halved VIP. So let's talk about two recoveries. There's the mass recovery. When will the 22 billion hit come back to where it is? Well, there's good news happening. There's construction is still going on while this is happening. There's going to be a lot more hotel rooms. So Londoners coming, Galaxy Phase 3 and 4, Wynn is going to be opening up, Studio City is going to have Phase 2. There's lots of action. Lisboa and Lisboeta, Grand Lisboa Palace are going to eventually open sometimes this decade. But once that happens, that means the 22 billion is, I think, more achievable. Yeah. I've seen a lot of analysts say that, oh no, VIP is going to do faster. Yeah, for the first 5%, 10%, it's easier to get a plane load of people coming in with VIP money. Yeah. But to go back to the good old days, there is no more good old days for VIP. VIP is 14 billion. I think that's going to go down even further because the restriction of money flowing outside is not the right time to go ahead and be assisting money leaving China.
Does it seem like the casino operators themselves, the 6 concessionaires, are going to be retooling their strategy? I mean, obviously you have groups like Sands China, who from the get-go had the mass image. They were going for that. Then you have groups like Wynn, which seem a little bit more VIP focused. Melco, which it seems like they've done a lot with premium mass. Do you think that all of them are going to be now retooling their strategies and their properties to focus on mass?
I'm not sure if there's that much properties that could be changed. I mean, this is going to cost hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to go ahead and redo them. But you have multiple departments, multiple teams, and you have a whole bunch of hotel rooms that you have to give away. The strategy is not going to be that much different. You're just going to say, hey, you know, premium mass team, you know, mass team, you have more rooms available at your disposal. Or, hey, VIP, it's going to be tough. But you know what? You may even want to go the other way and say, you have more rooms available at your disposal because we want you to go and do whatever you can to lure the junkets coming in. I don't think that's going to be that much different. People are not going to be laid off or fired because of this. Because suddenly, everyone, compared to a month ago, suddenly every department is going to have far more likely customers coming back. Some will be 3-4 times more, some people will be twice as much. Those are going to be busy times. People are busy nowadays in Macau, planning and ready, you know, in a week from now or come Golden Week, it'll be our first test to see whether or not something happens. I remain pessimistic. I think it will be good, but whether or not it's going to sustain itself come October, come November, what's going to happen? I think the good news for the casinos is that they will stop bleeding. Right? The 30–40% of the last year's numbers is enough to kind of break even. So if they hit 30–40%, which is very doable by come November, December, then that's great. At least they're not losing money. And then we can then worry about, hopefully, there'll be great news coming in, the vaccination, how it gets distributed around the world, how much gets accepted, the US elections and what's going to happen over there. That's another challenge. And there's going to be a lot more factors to go, but I just think that it will take some time.
It's interesting just now you mentioned that they're going to be busy, but we've also seen within the past couple months that there have been mass layoffs of people from, it started off mainly with the blue card holders, and then they've shifted to middle, upper management and things like that. Given that they're going to be getting more busy and they're going to be needing to have some of these people within management in place, do you think that given what you've seen on the ground of some of these executives being distanced or taking no pay leave or being let go from the company entirely, are they going to be ready to be able to do that with the teams that they have in-house?
You know, I think it's somewhat excessive, some of the individual cases of people having been let go, but you kind of feel for where they've been.
Mm-hmm.
There's really three classes of employees in Macau. There's the blue card people who are cleaning the rooms, doing the jobs that other people don't want to do. Then there's the locals, which are in low-end jobs, mid-end jobs, and some management position. And then there's the expats who there's the other groups of expats who happen to be on the senior management to senior management position.
Yeah.
These three groups of people, low-end blue card, middle management, I mean Macau, whether it's middle management and everything else, and then the upper management expat, is really divided into management and non-management. The government does not allow anybody from the biggest group, which happens to be locals, who happen to be the middle of the road, to be let go. So there's very little area that you can actually get rid of. Yes, you don't need as many rooms. When your occupancy of some of the hotels in Cotai was 2%, do you really need that many people to clean up the rooms? I can understand the blue cards being cut and bringing come back. The challenging part is, I think they went a little bit too far by getting rid of some of the people who had been in Macau 15, 16 years with one of the properties. Those people may have had 3 or 4 more years to hand off all their knowledge before eventually leaving Macau, because eventually we all know Macau planned almost 20 years. And we're 16 years into the experiment, 2004, from Sands opened up. It's reasonable for the Chinese, for the locals to eventually take over almost every position, right? I think so.
And they talk about that a lot. They talk about the training programs and how they want to have upward mobility and everything.
Correct. And again, immigration and the government has actually helped doing that by restricting blue cards.
Yeah.
There's a lot fewer blue cards available.
Well, especially now.
Yeah. When I was at my last employer, I had 5,000 people under me in my department. We had 10 blue cards out of 5,000, because that was a gaming operation. The government came back and said, of the 10, you can keep 2. 2 out of 5,000, just within that group. Obviously, it's dominated by the dealers are supposed to be. But that is actually doing a good job. But, it's kind of a tricky one. It's a tricky situation. I feel for the concessionaires, but I just think that sometimes to save $1 million here and there in salaries and look good in Wall Street, is it really good to somewhat, not take into account the loyalty of some of the people who've actually put their lives on hold for 15, 16 years, suffered here, and because of the fact that nobody else could be fired, they've been let go. I think that's kind of a
well, and it seems interesting from a regional point of view, because we've got other properties that are popping up, that are going to be popping up, and it seems like there's a need for talent there as well. So do you think some of these people are going to be hold a grudge and want to go to other jurisdictions and then maybe lure away some of Macau's potential clients?
I'm not sure whether they're going to be holding a grudge. They need a job. A lot of these people,
everybody needs a job.
lot of these directors and vice presidents, they're not making as much money. So obviously they want to go somewhere. Whether or not they're going to go ahead and try to bring some people on board, it's difficult. When you're in the major leagues, when this is the gaming capital of the world, obviously a Manila, a Seoul, potentially Japan in the future, Vietnam would want you, but it's a different world.
Yeah.
It's a different. It's not the Premier League, and this is where the action is at least because everybody else is suffering. It's not just a Macau, individual Macau like it was in 14, 15 because of anti-corruption. Everybody in the world is suffering, and if anything, I think Macau is actually going to do better in going back. Not the locals, it's a very small local base, but I think Macau will recover relatively sooner because China is almost 1.4 billion people in China, and China likes Macau. Of the two brothers, Macau and Hong Kong, definitely. Yeah,
we are definitely in their good books as opposed to Hong Kong.
Absolutely.
We've seen that through some of the measures, including the national security legislation as well. But sticking with the casino side of things, the 2020, 2021 may be written off in terms of doing like we had before. But we've also got the casino license retendering, which is going to be happening, and that's still quite vague. We know that there's going to be a public consultation on it.
Yes.
We don't know when the actual retendering process is going to happen. What do you think these operators are feeling right now?
I think everybody's waiting for November 3rd, the result of the election.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the way things are looking, the result of the election will not be known until December at the earliest. And even that will be challenged. You really do want to know whether or not there is going to be a hostile, not to say that Democrats are not necessarily have the same, they're pro-China, but at least they are less anti-China. They still, they don't call it, they don't insult the COVID-19 and calling it derogatory terms. So I think that's one of the reasons you want to hold off. But the other one is nobody anticipated to be this bad. When earlier this year they said things are going to go and we're going to find out and retender. I think the public is quite expect this. There's a force majeure point where the chief executive can actually go and do a 5-year extension, up to 5 years. You can say, you know what, I don't want to make a decision now. Because the world is on fire, because of multiple things that's going on, I want to go ahead and give myself another 2 years. I think that's very reasonable. And I think people will understand it because the world is experiencing something that happens once every 100 years. So I think that is probably the wisest thing to do. But as to whether or not the operators are feeling and sweating it, this is not easy. They've been wondering about this quite some time, and they have rights too. You don't wait until your 20-year lease is out a couple months before the landlord says you got to get out of here. You got to make preparation if there is going to be some kind of.
Well, and the laws themselves have to be changed.
Yes, there was supposed to be three gaming licenses, and now we have 6 operators. That's the whole crazy, wild story of how Macau went from 3 to 6. But also, is there a 7th one? It's not a renewal. It's actually a retendering. Is there a chance?
I wanted to ask about that. So we had a bit of a complication in terms of the Wynn story and everything that was happening with Steve Wynn, and then there was also some news coverage within mainland news media about Sun City, which was not necessarily positive towards them. And MGM is also in flux a little bit after the exit of Grant Bowie and then Panzio stepping in a little bit more. What do you think, because of the US election, because of the tensions between China and the United States, what do you think is going to be happening within this license retendering? Do you think that there's a possibility for any of these companies, particularly US-linked companies, to not keep their license?
I anticipated this question before you came over here. I looked at the numbers. In 2019, 48% of gaming revenue came from the 3 U.S. companies, MGM, Wynn, and Venetian. But in terms of property EBITDA, adjusted property EBITDA, they accounted for $57 billion. That's $5 billion that over the last 3 years, the U.S. companies per year, $5 billion US has just been their EBITDA. Net profit, effectively. That is kind of one of the reasons China is not too anxious to go ahead and make the U.S. companies richer at the blood, sweat, and tears of the mainland Chinese. Even though technically they're gambling and it's willing, and this is, just nobody put a bullet to their gun to their head and said you have to go and gamble. I can understand this, but so as long as there is hostility from the U.S. administration towards individual, not just China collectively, but individual companies, and you're just saying you out and you stay. And
like we're seeing with TikTok and some of
TikTok, Huawei, and there's going to be potentially more if this thing keeps going. He may ratchet it up, Trump may. If that's going to continue, obviously China is going to use these chips, these gaming chips, which are MGM, Venetian, and Wynn, as potentially bargaining tools to be able to mitigate or to be able to prevent further escalation of this of such a thing. So whether or not, I'm not sure, the question was who is going to be amongst
who's most vulnerable? Who do you think would be the likely company that would either maybe go into another joint venture, lose the license entirely, be consumed by another company?
I think the probability of one of these companies losing a license is less than 50%. If I were to make a bet, I think this is just my personal quote unquote educated guess or uneducated guess. I think the likelihood of that happening You have to wait to see if Trump wins and whether or not he wants to continue this. For all we know, he may actually want to go ahead and reverse course and he's no longer concerned about the election. He may want to go ahead and be different. We don't know. But the likelihood of that happening is 30, 35, 40% of such a thing happening. Now, if you want to go ahead and try to get rid of one of these things, if you did want to go do that, there's going to be some repercussions. I mean, this is not
a huge process also.
Not only is it reprocessed.
It's only the casino floor that will then revert to the government, not the property itself.
Yes, that's one thing. But it's also, just look at it. You expect these companies to have come in here since 2002. They started the construction. Since they built in 2004, they opened in 2006 and 2007. They collectively entered, individually entered. And they've spent easily 15, 20, 25 billion dollars just in infrastructure, let alone all the salaries and everything else that they paid. That is pretty serious.
Hey, they've made a lot in the meantime also, though.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. No question about it. I did one of these little videos a while ago. I remember, I think from 2011 to 2019, Sands China, Wynn, and MGM collectively have taken home in net profit 40 billion US dollars. That's serious money, right? 5 billion times 9, maybe in the beginning it wasn't as much. That's serious money. Now, have they reinvested some of this back? Yes, they've built something in the interim. Wynn opened up, Parisian opened up 2016, MGM opened up 2018. But going forward, are they going to be spending as much money? No, not so. Now, you want to decide which one, if I had the gun to shoot which one of them, you can almost make cases for, it's a tricky question, but the target is to exert influence on Sands China, Venetian, because he happens to have more sway with Trump. So there's a Chinese way of saying, kill a rooster to scare the monkey. You wouldn't want to go ahead and say, goodbye, Sands China. You'd want to go ahead and show a gun, use a gun, and saying, you're next. Now, whether or not it's going to be Wynn and MGM, if there was ever going to be a Wynn, the perfect time would have been 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Exactly.
When the whole imbroglios, the whole shenanigans and everything else that happened until, that's been long past. They've been good citizens so far. So what's going on with MGM? That's a tricky one.
That's very complicated because it involves MGM and then also, you know, Pansy Ho, the link to SJM, what's happening with Shuntak, all of the kind of reorganization of that.
You can make a case for that one as well, but again, it would be if somebody has to pull the trigger, they should be very reluctant to do so. But I doubt it would be Sands China, simply because that is the one that will have exert an influence. And once you get rid of them, you can't undo it, right? So again, a tough question, but it would be one of the two between Wynn and MGM. I am not going to pontificate or try to figure out what is going to happen between these two. But it would be these two as opposed to the third one.
We had, when we first talked, we were discussing Sun City's status and what they were doing, their kind of machinations, also what they were doing with the Beijing Imperial Hotel and all of that. They have since gotten they've gotten mentions within the Chinese media for certain things that didn't look necessarily good for their image. They came back and said, no, this is not true. And they've also since worked on making sure that things have been all above board. Do you think that they would be one of the competitors for a potential lost license or 7th license?
I think most likely it would be the 7th license, but I believe so. They were riding high until last summer. Sun City had done everything right. They had invested in mass gaming in Vladivostok, in Manila.
Through some of the
planning. They were all over Japan. They were all over Wakayama. Hoyana opened up earlier this year. They were going to say, we're no longer junket. We've transitioned to become a integrated resort company. And also the New Century. Right. But suddenly everything came to a halt last summer. I'm talking about 2019, when there was news of online gaming. What are you doing? And then there was an emergency Saturday news conference where Alvin Chow came in and said, this is not the case. We're not going to be doing it. They've been knocked down a peg. I still think they're the most legitimate company. If there were to be a 7th license holder, they're the most legitimate one to have done this.
But how does that face up against the Gentings and other large gaming companies of the world? Because they can still go for the retendering process. They can still put in their bid.
Name a single entity.
From what we know now.
Name a single entity that Genting has actually been on the top. In Singapore, they're always last. In Malaysia, they're first out of first, and there's only one. It's a monopoly, and they're also last out of just one contender. I don't think there's enough appetite for any foreign company. It's not just anti-American. It's pro-Chinese.
Okay.
This is a nationalism.
Okay.
They'd want to go ahead and control it. The other thing is, as much as there is absolutely a government anti-junket, anti-VIP stance, it is better to go from the 99, 95 junkets a year ago, and it used to be 250 a few years back. It's better for everyone involved for there to be 4, 5, a dozen respected corporate junkets running the show than to have some hooligan meeting up with his cousin and the other guy who just came out of prison, and the three of them together grab a baseball bat and then they form a junket. This is definitely not the right image for Macau.
Yeah.
So in a way, Sun City is much more controllable and much more legitimate.
Well, I mean, they are a publicly listed company. They control something like 70% of the VIP market.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, the percentage of the VIP depends on which year you're talking about,
yeah.
but easily 50% of the junket market at one point belonged to them. I don't know what's happening since you can't really talk of 2020 because it's just funny money and it's not really there. But yeah, I mean, they're definitely the 800-pound gorilla. And we have a young owner who's ambitious, who would like to go into the cleaner mass side and potentially non-gaming side. That actually would be an ideal one. Compare that to the satellite casino. The biggest headache for me, the chief executive, isn't whether or not there's going to be a seventh license. The question is what to do about those dozens.
Do you think they're going to get rid of them? Because it's not only, we were talking about this the other day, it's not only SJM that has satellite casinos, it's other operators also.
The 3 Chinese companies, Melco has 1.
Yeah.
Galaxy has 3 or 4, 2 or 3, depending on what you call Waldo,
Star
Grand
World
Waldo.
and Broadway.
No, Star World and Galaxy are the 2 legitimate ones.
Yeah.
Then you got the little Broadway, and then you've got, I think Waldo, I believe, or Grand Waldo, one of those. But there's some city ones. But the real, of the 20-some casinos that SJM owns, the legitimate ones are probably 4 or 5. There's the old Grand Lisboa. There's going to be the Grand Lisboa Palace. There's going to be Lisboeta. A surprise. How in the world did they get that gaming license? That was a shocking news to me. And perhaps the old Lisboa. The rest of them are just a bunch of little, kingdoms that are there. And how could you get rid of them?
Well, especially given what they've done for Macau's gaming revenue during this epidemic situation as well, because they've still been bringing in some money.
Yeah, because locals, absolutely. Yes. But did they really do it out of the goodness of their hearts? It's not like charitable environment. They basically came in there and people had nothing to do in Macau. It was relatively safe in Macau. And they went and gambled. Mocha's doing the same thing fantastically. So I'm just wondering whether or not these companies who never saw what an IR is, do we really want to go ahead and, if I were the chief executive, and I'm not, if I were the chief executive, I would say, you know what? Cotai is where all the sin should be.
Yeah.
And the main street from Sands all the way up to Grand Lisboa and Wynn. That main street, Avenida Amizade, I believe I'm not pronouncing it. That would be where the action is, where the sin would be. It's easy to control. They're relative integrated resorts compared for the peninsula. There's a relatively large ones on MGM. And everything else, thanks but no thanks. Go. You have 5 years to close.
Okay.
Now, they may protest and say, wait a minute, I've got a casino, Oceanus, I've got Babylon, I've got some of these little ones. Again, I'm not picking on those specifically, but these little ones.
Well, you've got Golden Dragon, you've got Macau Legends, you've got some,
Absolutely.
to name the main ones, I would say, that are
Take
smaller.
their table and say, you know what?
Paradise.
Together, take your 30 tables and just sit on the side, and we'll take your 30 tables and we'll give you the money, the equivalent amount of money. Allow it to go and be under the big, giant Grand Lisboa Palace.
Okay.
Something along those lines.
Okay.
I mean, put some real management company who knows what's going on, because sometimes when you go back, Macau does have a time machine. If you really want to go back to the 70s and 80s, just walk into some of these casinos that are sitting there. You literally wonder, how is this even possible? Except the smoking is gone. That's the only thing that's different. Everything else is identical.
And the Komodo dragons, apparently.
That's right. There is no. that's very true. Very true. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely. I think this is the biggest headache, and they don't know what to do with these. There's political power. Some of these may be very difficult to get rid of. They have certain contentions. Certain provinces tend to go there, but that's where the chief executive is going to have to, That's where he earns his money, is the tough decisions he's going to have to make.
What about I mean, we have this table cap. Do you think that there's going to be any fluctuation in terms of that? And do these operators need more tables?
You know, table cap was an unfair deal that was engineered to stop the tank that Sands China was. They were just doing so good, so fantastic. I was there with them at the time. I was there in 2010. And it was plotted up because they just had these big giant properties, and they said, you got to slow it down. But it worked out, actually. The biggest victim of this table cap was MGM.
Yeah.
For strange reasons, MGM, which has relatively same size of property in Peninsula, got fewer tables than Wynn Peninsula. And when they went across, for whatever reason, they got even fewer tables. They got 125 tables. Wynn Palace got 150 tables. Parisian got 150 tables. And the two other companies, the two Chinese companies, Melco and Galaxy, got 250 tables. They ended up on the short end of the stick. It's not reasonable, but right now, for the next 2-3 years, table capacity is not an issue.
It seems like
let's really worry about getting back to it. There is a method to the madness. There was a rationale, which was at one point, every single person who came out of college, instead of going to the banking, instead of going and doing analytics, is going to some of their engineers were lured to just sit there and collect money because of the monopoly. So again, it's something that's happened in the past. Whether or not it's going to be opened up, the government actually has the ability to go and do this, but that's not the biggest headache. The biggest headache is when is going to happen. I personally think that there will be I think the chances of a 7th license holder is 50-50. I think the 4th, 5th, and 6th, the American ones will not be booted out.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think it's 2-1 against it. But what do I know? And again, I don't claim to know what's going to happen in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah. It's interesting to see that all of this happened in a year in which we had just come under new leadership. And we have the epidemic, and we have it seems like there's a lot of public faith in the administration currently because of how they handled the epidemic. That also means that it's going to bleed over into other issues. We have the Urban Master Plan, which just came out. We're going to be having the license retendering process. What do you think about the current leadership that is in place, and how is that going to affect? For example, there was one point in which the chief executive said that they had not had very much dialogue with the casino industry during the course of the pandemic, given that that industry contributes 85% of Macau's tax revenue. How does that interaction seem to somebody who is in the industry and knows it?
I've been in Macau 14 years. Macau is one of the safest places on earth. This only happened because we have a chief executive who knows what he's doing. If this had happened 1 year earlier, Macau would not have responded as well. It would have been definitely among the top 15, 20 countries in the world because it's a rich country, it had some. But leadership, decisiveness. The fact that even though the WHO didn't say anything about wearing a mask and was advising against it, he said, I'm wearing a mask. I'm a leader. I'll put it on. And every single time he's around people who's got the mask on. His consistency, his decisiveness. I don't think the chief executive, who came on board December 20th of last year, so he was only on board for, I think, 33, 34 days before suddenly, 3 or 4 days before Chinese New Year, is when Wuhan and China went to WHO and said, this is happening. And remember, we are literally, we're a couple of kilometers away from mainland China. We are right there. We're right near the teeth of the dragon. To have done what he did so fast, so rapidly, and compare that with Hong Kong and how they were so clumsy, how they got out of the gate completely. How they continue to be. The fact, the strictness of Macau, of the chief executive, is what's actually impressed me. I like the fact that doesn't matter who you are going to have to sit in that hotel room and be in prison for 14 days. And they have to come and test you until you get out. Instead of, oh, we trust you. Oh, that's so fantastic. Go to your room and don't get out. Go to your house and go quarantine yourself. What is that? That makes absolutely no sense. And that's one of the reasons that it was so difficult to track and trace what's actually happening. What happened in the summer in Hong Kong was unforgivable as far as the incompetence of not having seen it. It's not as though these hotels were not available. They had plenty of occupancy. They should have been more strict and allowed this to happen. Now, how many decisions has the chief executive made in the 9-10 months he's been in? I don't know, probably 4 or 5 decisions. Does any human being, any leader, make correct decisions every single time? No. But all said, I'd rather have him. He's been more productive for Macau in the less than 1 year he's been here than the previous one, or any typical one we would have actually got. So we're very lucky that we are able to go ahead, have coffee, not worry about it. Yes, we still wear a mask. It's a good reminder, but we are, it's been, I believe, April 8th was the last time an actual COVID case entered Macau. And it's been something like 80 days since one guy was caught at the border, and we didn't trust him to come to Macau and quarantine and be nice and don't go downstairs and check things out and go to the gate. We did not trust these people, trust but verify. And that is precisely why Macau has done such a great job, because we have been, everybody gets treated the same.
And it's the only actual avenue that we have towards being able to be reopening like we are on the 23rd of September. And they've said that they're going to, if there is a locally transmitted case, then there's going to be a step back in terms of all these measures.
Absolutely.
So it really depends on what's going to happen from here on forward. Unfortunately, we've drawn to the end of our time today, but thank you very, very much for being on the show. There are so many other issues that I want to talk with you about also, because you have very many interests and passions. And, but please come back. We'd be happy to have you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's all for this week's TDM Talk Show. Join us again next week for more. Good night.